Hey there, so why do I care so much about this British Empire stuff? Well, over the past month, I've made it clear that I believe the United States is running an empire that is more similar to the British Empire than we usually like to admit. The US empire has also been making the same mistakes, which could lead to the same place. And if World War III happens, I believe it will be the fault of the United States more than anybody else. That's how seriously I take the British Empire comparison. The US empire is a lot stronger and a lot safer than its predecessor ever was. India, the main source of the British Empire's population and its initial wealth, was on the other side of the world, not in California or Texas. Both empires invented their main enemies, but Germany was a much closer and much more plausible threat to Britain than China will ever be to the United States. This US security should make us all feel safer. It's going to be a lot harder for the US to spark a world war the way the British did. But it's not impossible. There's a conflict from the early decades of British dominance that US policymakers should pay more attention to. You may have been puzzled by something in an earlier video. I placed the beginning of the British era with the 7 Years' War that started in 1756. So what the heck happened in 1781 when the British were forced to give up most of their North American territory? Back in the 1750s, a visionary British Prime Minister established the policy that won his country the world. Buy enough allies to distract your enemies with fighting on the continent, and with a strong navy, you can win absolutely everywhere else. That's what happened in the 7 Years' War. It was super clear to British enemies and allies alike that the British were the only people who won that conflict, establishing control of the world that lasted until 1914. And that was the problem. Everybody knows that US independence would have been a lot harder without the French, but that's not what was weird about the War of American Independence. The French and the British fought each other for centuries. What was weird about this conflict was that the British didn't have any allies at all. Not the Russians, not the Spanish, not the Austrians, not the Prussians, not even the Dutch, who up until this point were always up for a fight against the French. British success and arrogance about that success had turned everybody against them. That's what World War III will look like as well. The United States is still the most powerful country by far. Even if we're beginning to slip, we retain the advantages described above and the natural fortress that is North America. The only way another world war could break out before the 2050s is for the United States to turn absolutely everybody else against us. Unfortunately, we seem to be taking more and more positions that do just that. The war in Iraq is a great example. That was 16 years ago, when we were much more powerful, relatively speaking, and even then we had to lie through our teeth to assemble a coalition of the willing. Our current policy against Iran doesn't have any support at all. It's pure coercion, everybody else in the world hates it, and we're already beginning to see the consequences. After the British lost what became the United States, they made damn sure to never get in such a friendless position again. They tolerated and even rebuilt minor imperial states for powers like the French and the Dutch. When the British exerted power in Europe, they were usually careful to do so in the context of proto-multilateral concepts like the Concert of Europe. They tried not to rub anybody's nose in their overwhelming power, and they were largely successful, only briefly finding themselves without allies during a few months of the Napoleonic Wars and during the darkest days of World War II. The United States has not learned this lesson. In fact, it seems to be actively working against it now. Some think that Donald Trump's loud new unpredictability and America First brutality are good for US power. It's not. In fact, it's making people resent US power at exactly the wrong time, just as our grip is beginning to slip in a number of places. But this isn't just about Donald Trump. Our power looks shaky now because we have made ourselves weak by spreading ourselves too thin. Our aircraft carriers off Taiwan are very vulnerable to Chinese missiles, as more and more countries are officially committed to the idea that that island belongs to China. Nobody outside of Washington, D.C., or maybe Riyadh or Tel Aviv, thinks U.S. forces in the Middle East are helping anyone. more and more soldiers are stationed further and further away, and each individual soldier could be the spark that ignites World War III. That's not likely to happen today, but if all these soldiers are all in the same places another 2 decades from now, it gets a lot more likely. U.S. media conditions us to see this kind of overcommitment as normal and rational. I don't think the historians of World War III will see it the same way. You can still find academics who will argue that the British Empire's choice to kill itself to face the German threat to Europe made sense. I don't think they'll see the U.S. attempt to control faraway places like the South China Sea and the Persian Gulf in the same light. As I said at the beginning of this series, we in the United States are not good. We are not bad, but we are responsible. When the world's current golden age of peace and prosperity ends in general war, it will be the fault of the United States. So let's not let that happen. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. And if you want a book-length attempt to stave off World War III, you can check out my new book, Avoiding the British Empire, available now in paperback and in Amazon Kindle form. Thanks.